Have you ever felt like the story of our world is incomplete? Like there's a missing chapter hidden somewhere? A truth that no religion, no scientist, and no philosopher ever dared to reveal? That's exactly what the Urantia Book claims to be, a message dictated by celestial beings, explaining who we are, why we exist, and where the universe is really heading. It's not fiction. It's a 2,000-page revelation that has fascinated physicists, priests, and psychologists alike, a book that no one admits to writing, yet one that redefines the very idea of God, creation, and the soul. But here's the question. Could something this vast, this detailed, really come from beyond our world? Or did humanity itself create a cosmic illusion too beautiful to resist? Before we dive into the mystery, I want you to do one thing: like this video and share it with someone who questions everything. Because what you're about to discover might change the way you see reality itself. In 1955, a 2097-page book appeared quietly in Chicago, the Urantia Book. No author's name, no publisher's introduction, just a claim that its pages had been dictated by celestial beings. Since then, over 800,000 copies have been sold, and the book has been translated into more than 20 languages. Readers include scientists, philosophers, and even celebrities like Jimi Hendrix, Jerry Garcia, and Stevie Ray Vaughan. People searching not for another religion, but for meaning that transcends dogma. What was it in those pages that could make brilliant, skeptical minds pause and wonder if humanity had just been handed something extraordinary? To understand the phenomenon, we must go back to the 1920s. Dr. William Sadler, a respected psychiatrist and associate of Sigmund Freud, was one of the most rational men of his time. He specialized in detecting frauds, especially psychic mediums and so-called revelations. Yet one night, he was called to observe a patient in a trance who spoke with a voice not his own. Over the next 20 years, Sadler gathered transcripts from hundreds of these sessions. The material that emerged would later become the Urantia Papers. He was stunned, not by hysteria, but by the depth and coherence of what he read. The vocabulary was vast, the cosmology detailed, the logic consistent. Who could fake something like this? The early readers were a small group of intellectuals known as the Forum. They weren't fanatics or spiritualists. They included lawyers, engineers, and doctors. Together, they analyzed the pages line by line, searching for contradictions. But the more they read, the more they felt they were witnessing something that transcended human thought. The book spoke of a universe organized by intelligence, of a God not limited to religion, but present in every atom of reality. What made the Urantia Book unique wasn't only what it said, but how it said it. It didn't demand belief. It invited exploration. It didn't threaten punishment. It offered perspective. It began with cosmology, moved into philosophy, and ended with an expanded account of the life of Jesus. No other text had ever attempted such a complete vision of existence. The message was radical. Humanity is not an accident in a cold universe. It is part of an immense living system governed by love, intelligence, and purpose. Skeptics argued it was an elaborate hoax, possibly written by Sadler himself. But the problem with that theory was scale. The book described physical and astronomical phenomena unknown in the 1930s, some of which were later confirmed by science. It used terminology from physics and cosmology decades ahead of its time. Could one man, without access to global data, fabricate such complexity? Even Carl Sagan, though critical, admitted that the Urantia Book was a fascinating example of human imagination meeting cosmic aspiration. But behind the academic intrigue lies a deeper question. Why did humanity need this message then? The 20th century was a century of disillusionment, world wars, atomic fear, the loss of faith in progress. People were searching for something to reconnect them to meaning. The Urantia revelation came like a whisper in the dark, a reminder that chaos is not the final word. It offered a cosmology that integrated science and spirit, logic and faith. It taught that God is not a distant ruler, but the universal Father, the source of all life indwelling in every person as a fragment of divine consciousness, what it called the thought adjuster. Imagine hearing that for the first time. that inside you lives a literal fragment of the infinite, guiding you subtly toward perfection. For many, it was transformative. For others, blasphemy. But the message was consistent. Evolution, biological, intellectual, and spiritual, is the destiny of every human being. Nothing in creation is random. Everything has purpose. The tension lies here, between skepticism and wonder, between faith and logic. The Urantia Book never demanded that you choose one over the other. It presented the universe as a vast educational journey where science describes the mechanism and religion describes the meaning. Its tone wasn't that of a preacher, but of a teacher, calm, confident, cosmic. It declared Earth to be just one small experimental planet among billions, Urantia, as celestial beings call it. A world still young, still imperfect, yet loved by the Creator as deeply as any other. The mystery of its origin remains unsolved. No evidence of channeling fraud has ever been proven. No one has come forward claiming authorship. It seems to have appeared from nowhere, like a voice echoing from a higher realm into human history. And perhaps that's the point. Whether you see it as divine revelation, subconscious genius, or collective spiritual intuition, the Urantia Book invites you to ask the most important question of all, and not who wrote it, but why did it find me? Because in that question begins the journey it describes, from the human mind toward the mind of the universe itself. The authors of the Urantia Book never called themselves spirits, angels, or extraterrestrials. They identified as celestial beings, representatives of vast orders of intelligence serving under what they called the Universal Father. To the modern reader, this sounds like mythology dressed in cosmic language. Yet the text is written with the precision of a scientific manual and the coherence of a philosophical treatise. It names its writers, divine counselors, perfecters of wisdom, Melchizedeks, life carriers, each responsible for specific papers. This was not a single voice speaking in riddles. It was a structured collaboration, as if an entire spiritual civilization had come forward to explain the architecture of existence itself. What makes this extraordinary is the tone. These entities never beg for worship, they instruct. They claim that the revelation was granted not to found a new religion, but to expand human understanding, to reconcile faith with reason. Their message is clear. Religion must not be static. Revelation is evolutionary. They describe themselves as transmitters, not creators of truth. The truth, they insist, already exists in every human soul, but humanity has forgotten how to listen. Many readers wonder, if these beings are real, why choose Earth? Why this small blue world lost in space? The text answers, because Urantia is a rebellion-scarred planet. In its cosmology, our world once belonged to an administrative system governed by celestial personalities. One of them, named Lucifer, revolted against divine authority, claiming that free beings did not need divine guidance. His rebellion corrupted part of the system, isolating Earth. That's why, according to the book, human civilization developed in confusion, a world spiritually quarantined until it could mature. This mythic narrative mirrors the psychological story of humanity's separation from meaning, our collective fall into disconnection. If this sounds symbolic, that's because it is. The Urantia Book operates on multiple levels, historical, cosmic, and psychological. The rebellion isn't just a cosmic event, it's the internal conflict inside every human mind between ego and divine intuition. The Lucifer Manifesto, as it's called, resonates eerily with what modern psychologists like Carl Jung would later describe as the shadow, the rebellion of the conscious mind against the self, the inner source of wholeness. The book insists that communication between humans and these celestial orders isn't supernatural. It's natural but forgotten. Every person, it says, has within them a fragment of the divine, the thought adjuster, a literal piece of God's consciousness. These beings, according to the text, don't dictate from above. They inspire from within. Revelation is a cooperative act, a merging of human intention with cosmic intelligence. When a person reaches higher states of consciousness, through meditation, moral living, or pure curiosity, that fragment resonates more clearly, and the mind begins to perceive universal truth. This idea isn't as alien as it seems. Great minds throughout history have spoken of something similar. Nikola Tesla once said his ideas came to him as if from the ether. Albert Einstein described intuition as the sacred gift and reason as its faithful servant. Even the philosopher William James wrote about the noetic quality of mystical experience, the feeling of receiving knowledge that is both personal and universal. The Urantia Book simply systematized what mystics and scientists had glimpsed, that consciousness might be a channel through which higher intelligence expresses itself. Still, skeptics point out that channeled texts often reflect the language and worldview of their time. And it's true. The English of the Urantia Book is distinctly mid-20th century. But what makes it unusual is its scale. Its description of celestial hierarchies, planetary management, and universal government reads like an interdimensional sociology. It suggests that each world has its own overseers, each inhabited realm forming part of an immense living administration where free will is preserved but guided. Humanity, it says, is not ruled but nurtured. The authors explain that their intervention was permitted only because Earth's spiritual evolution had stagnated. Too much confusion, too much division between science and faith. The time had come, they claimed, for a new synthesis, one that would not erase existing religions but illuminate them. Revelation, they write, is not meant to contradict human experience, but to coordinate it. In other words, they were not giving answers. They were expanding the frame. Readers who've experienced moments of clarity, the sudden insight that feels larger than thought, often describe the same sensation that the Urantia authors evoke, that knowledge can arrive not through study, but through alignment. That truth is not something learned but remembered. The text insists that humanity is slowly evolving toward a state where this communication with higher intelligence will no longer require intermediaries. Revelation will become perception. And so, we are left with a paradox. If these celestial beings are real, they are not distant deities watching from above. They are collaborators in our growth. But if they are not real then, the Urantia Book becomes something equally remarkable, a collective document of the human imagination reaching toward the divine, a mirror reflecting our deepest longing to be guided, understood, and part of something greater. Either way, the message is the same. Humanity is not abandoned. We are students in a living universe, and the classroom is our consciousness itself. Imagine standing beneath a night sky, the kind our ancestors once saw before the cities drowned the stars. Every light above us, each star, each galaxy, a possible world, a home for minds unlike ours. Now imagine that instead of chaos, all of it follows a vast and intelligent order. That's exactly what the Urantia Book describes, a universe not random, but exquisitely structured, alive with purpose. It speaks not in the language of religion, but of cosmic geography, an organized creation of unimaginable scale and beauty. According to the Urantia Book, existence is built around a central universe called Havona, an eternal, perfect creation surrounding the dwelling place of God, the Universal Father. Around Havona spiral 7 enormous super-universes, each containing billions of inhabited worlds. Ours, the book claims, belongs to the 7th, Orvonton. Within Orvonton lies our local universe, Nebadon, ruled by a creator son known as Michael of Nebadon, the being we know on Earth as Jesus of Nazareth. This redefinition is not symbolic, it is structural. In this model, Jesus is not merely a historical figure, but the personal creator of our local universe, incarnating on Earth to experience his own creation firsthand. It sounds mythic, but the text presents it like a cosmic administration, a government of light. Each level of creation has its own order of beings, from high administrators and universe creators to the humble seraphic guardians who minister to mortal minds. It's a hierarchy, yes, but one driven by love, not power. The universe is depicted as an organism, each part conscious of the whole, each life form contributing to the experience of the Supreme Being, the evolving God of time and space. This structure isn't meant to replace science, it's meant to extend it. Modern astrophysics tells us there are 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. The Urantia Book, written before this discovery, claimed that inhabited worlds are counted in the billions and that the cosmos is organized into vast systems orbiting a central source of gravity, what it calls the Isle of Paradise. When this was first published in 1955, such a description seemed poetic at best. But decades later, observations like the cosmic microwave background radiation and the structure of superclusters began to echo this same fractal order, layers upon layers of organization surrounding unseen gravitational centers. Was it coincidence or insight beyond its time? But the Urantia Book goes beyond astronomy. It describes the purpose behind the structure. The universe, it says, is a school, a grand system of spiritual education. Every soul begins its journey on a material planet like ours, learns through struggle and imperfection, and gradually ascends through higher worlds after death. Each sphere represents a new lesson, a new level of consciousness, until the soul eventually reaches Havana and stands in the presence of the Universal Father. This is not heaven as a static reward, but evolution as divine destiny. Perfection is not given. It's earned through experience, wisdom, and love. Think of the psychological resonance here. Every human life already mirrors that same process: birth, learning, failure, growth, transcendence. The macrocosm and the microcosm are one. The structure of the universe, in the Urantia Book, is also the structure of the human soul. Each person, it says, is a miniature universe, complex, imperfect, but capable of reaching harmony with the whole. The book also challenges our sense of isolation. It claims there are countless civilizations, each at different stages of spiritual progress, and that advanced worlds have long achieved harmony between science and faith. Some have transcended war, disease, and fear entirely. To them, humans are infants just beginning to open their eyes. These civilizations, however, cannot intervene freely. The cosmic law of free will forbids interference, ensuring that every world must grow through its own challenges. Earth's pain, from this perspective, is not punishment. It's a necessary stage in evolution. This idea resonates with modern psychology and spirituality alike. Carl Jung believed that human development follows an archetypal pattern of integration, the union of the fragmented self into wholeness. The Urantia Book describes the same process on a cosmic scale, a fragmented universe returning to unity, individuals rediscovering their connection to the source. The suffering of humanity becomes part of a universal healing, a slow awakening that leads from chaos to order. Skeptics may dismiss this as imaginative mythology, but for those who've studied it deeply, scientists, theologians, and seekers alike, its power lies not in whether it's factually provable, but in how it reshapes the way we see reality. It invites us to see meaning in the patterns of the cosmos, to realize that evolution isn't just biological, but spiritual. That our universe might be conscious, progressive, and designed for the growth of souls. In this grand architecture, Earth, Urantia, is small but precious, a world scarred by rebellion, yes, but destined for enlightenment. The universe, the text insists, is patient. It has all eternity to teach us. And as we evolve, we're not merely surviving within it, we're contributing to its perfection, one awakening mind at a time. Because in this cosmic design, even the smallest act of truth, the faintest spark of love, ripples outward, touching worlds we cannot see, shaping destinies we cannot imagine. When the Urantia Book speaks of God, it doesn't begin with fear, judgment, or religion. It begins with a presence, not a being sitting on a throne in the clouds, but an infinite consciousness that permeates everything, energy, matter, and mind alike. The text calls him the Chok Universal Father, the first source and center of all reality. Everything, galaxies, angels, even human thought, flows from this origin. Yet paradoxically, the closer you approach him, the less definable he becomes. The Father, it says, is infinitely personal, yet universally impersonal. A mystery so vast that even celestial beings can only glimpse fragments of his nature. The Urantia revelation redefines divinity in a way that merges science, philosophy, and spirituality. God is not static, he is living. He is not outside the universe, but within it, simultaneously transcendent and immanent. He is both the architect and the energy sustaining the architecture. To understand him, says the book, is to understand the pattern behind all existence. This is not theology, it's cosmic psychology. Humanity's concept of God, the book explains, evolves as our consciousness evolves. Primitive man feared him, religious man worshipped him, enlightened man begins to know him. And yet, the text insists that knowing God is not an intellectual pursuit but an experience, one that occurs when we become aware of the divine fragment dwelling within us. Fate calls this the Yuk thought adjuster, the direct presence of the universal Father inside every human soul. Not metaphorically, but literally. This fragment guides thought, intuition, and moral choice, whispering constantly toward truth, beauty, and goodness. Every time a person chooses compassion over anger, courage over fear, or truth over convenience, that adjuster grows closer to the personality it indwells. Over time, human and divine unite, the mortal self fusing with the eternal fragment, achieving what the book calls fusion, the beginning of immortality. In this cosmology, God is not just the creator, he is a participant. The Father shares his essence with every being capable of choice, experiencing creation through countless minds and lives. It's a theology of co-creation. God expands through us. And here lies the foundation for one of the most profound ideas in the Urantia Book, the concept of the Supreme Being. The Supreme is not another deity, but the growing soul of the universe itself, the accumulation of all creature experience, the evolving consciousness of time and space. Every decision made by every intelligent being contributes to the Supreme's evolution. When a human being chooses truth, the Supreme becomes more real. When an entire civilization advances in wisdom and harmony, the Supreme expands. This isn't poetry, it's cosmic evolution, divinity growing through experience. The universe, in this sense, is God becoming self-aware. This idea connects astonishingly with what modern science and psychology have begun to explore. Theoretical physicists speak of a universe fine-tuned for consciousness, and quantum theory hints that observation itself might shape reality. In psychology, thinkers like Abraham Maslow and Viktor Frankl discovered that meaning and transcendence are basic human needs, not luxuries. The Urantia Book bridges these fields, suggesting that both physics and psychology are fragments of one greater truth, that the universe seeks self-realization through the evolution of conscious beings. Even the ancient philosophers seem to sense this. Plotinus described the One as emanating creation in waves of consciousness. Spinoza saw God and nature as two names for the same reality, and Jesus, the Jesus of the Urantia Book, taught that the kingdom of heaven is within you, not somewhere beyond the stars. These are not contradictions, they are echoes of the same truth spoken through different minds. The text also introduces two divine collaborators alongside the universal Father, the Maes, eternal Son, and the Christ, infinite Spirit. The eternal Son represents perfect spiritual reality, the embodiment of divine love and mercy. The infinite Spirit represents divine action, the mind that coordinates energy and spirit. Together they form the Trinity. Not as dogma, but as functional unity, three expressions of one consciousness operating on different frequencies of reality. When humans pray, the text says, their prayers don't travel through empty space. They are instantly registered in this living circuit of divinity, understood by the infinite Spirit, adjusted by the thought adjuster, and ultimately embraced by the universal Father. The act of prayer is therefore not a request to a distant power, but a resonance, a tuning of the human mind to the cosmic frequency of love. But the Urantia Book doesn't stop at theology. It turns the question back on us. What does it mean for a mortal to reflect divine personality? It teaches that personality, your unique identity, is God's gift. Unlike energy or matter, personality doesn't evolve from below, it's bestowed from above. This means that individuality is sacred. No two souls are identical. To grow closer to God isn't to dissolve into an impersonal void, it's to become more distinct, more real, more you. The challenge then isn't to worship God in fear, but to cooperate with him in creativity. Every act of kindness, every discovery, every honest question contributes to the universe's unfolding. The Supreme Being is built from our experiences, and one day the text predicts, when the Supreme reaches full realization, all finite creation will be unified in light, the cosmos becoming conscious of its own source. So when the Urantia Book speaks of God, it's not talking about an ancient monarch or a myth. It's describing a living intelligence that evolves through us, breathes through us, and calls each of us to remember who we really are. Fragments of eternity learning through time how to love. The final and longest section of the Urantia Book, nearly half of its 2,000 pages, is devoted to one figure, Jesus of Nazareth. But not the Jesus of organized religion, nor the distant savior framed by centuries of doctrine. This is a Jesus described by celestial beings who claim to have witnessed his entire life, from before his birth to after his resurrection. It's a story meant not just to inspire faith, but to illuminate the psychology and spirituality of a being who embodied divine consciousness within human limitation. The narrative begins before Bethlehem, in the realms of spirit. The book reveals that Michael of Nebadon, a creator son responsible for an entire local universe, chose to incarnate on one of his most troubled worlds, our own Urantia. The purpose was not punishment or atonement, but revelation, to show finite creatures what the infinite looks like when it walks among them. It's a breathtaking idea that Jesus' mission was part of a cosmic tradition, one of 7 incarnations through which every creator son personally experiences the lives of his creatures. His coming to Earth, then, was not random. It was planned, sacred, and deeply personal. Unlike the Gospels, which leap from birth to adulthood, the Urantia Book fills in the missing years. We see the boy Jesus growing up in Nazareth, losing his father Joseph at a young age, and feeling the weight of responsibility for his family. He works with his hands, questions traditions, and studies the religions of his world: Greek philosophy, Jewish law, Persian mysticism. He sees beauty in each but recognizes their limits. From a young age, he speaks of God not as a king, but as a loving father, a term unheard of in that time's theology. Psychologically, this portrayal is profound. The book presents Jesus as the prototype of emotional balance, never hurried, never afraid, perfectly attuned to the will of his inner divine guide. He embodies what modern psychology would call self-actualization, the alignment of the conscious self with its highest potential. Yet he isn't distant. He laughs with children, weeps with friends, feels anger at hypocrisy. His divinity doesn't erase his humanity, it perfects it. One of the most remarkable elements in the Urantia Book is its description of Jesus' early travels before his public ministry, journeys through the Mediterranean world that have no parallel in traditional scripture. He visits Alexandria, Rome, and the Caspian region, engaging philosophers, skeptics, and spiritual seekers of every culture. Each encounter becomes a lesson about tolerance, courage, and the unity of truth across civilizations. It's as if he was preparing the spiritual foundation for a global consciousness centuries ahead of its time. When he begins his public mission, the celestial narrators emphasize not miracles but his method. Jesus never demands belief, he invites understanding. He speaks in parables not to obscure meaning, but to awaken insight. His greatest miracle, the book insists, is not walking on water or raising the dead. It's transforming human fear into faith. Every act, every word, reveals a mind anchored in love, guided by the quiet certainty that every person he met was a child of God. The text diverges sharply from conventional theology in how it explains the crucifixion. It denies that Jesus' death was a divine requirement for forgiveness. Instead, it portrays the cross as the inevitable consequence of light confronting ignorance. The celestial witnesses say that the universe never demanded blood to balance sin, only transformation. Jesus died because humanity wasn't ready for unconditional truth, not because God demanded sacrifice. This interpretation turns the story from one of guilt into one of awakening. After the resurrection, the Urantia Book offers extraordinary detail, describing 40 appearances to various individuals and groups, his teachings after death, and his final ascension from Mount Olivet. But it's what follows that gives the narrative its philosophical depth. The celestial authors explain that Jesus continues his mission across the universe, serving as the living link between mortal beings and the infinite Father. His spirit, the spirit of truth, remains on every world, silently guiding each mind toward unity with the divine. The tone of these chapters is profoundly psychological. The focus isn't worship, but imitation, the art of living as Jesus lived. The book describes him as the ideal human, demonstrating the balance between will and surrender, individuality and universality. He never sought to dominate but to liberate. His authority came from authenticity, the natural radiance of one who has nothing to hide. This vision of Jesus changes everything. It reframes faith not as submission, but as participation in a cosmic process. Humanity's destiny, the book insists, is to follow the same path of integration, to let the divine fragment within fuse with the human self just as it did in him. "Be you perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect," he said, not as command, but as prophecy. And if this is true, if this version of Jesus reflects even a fraction of reality, then his story isn't ancient history. It's a map, a guide showing that enlightenment isn't reserved for saints or angels, but is the destiny of every conscious soul. Whether you believe the celestial witnesses or not, their message remains timeless. The life of Jesus was the universe's way of saying, "This is who you are meant to become." At first glance, the Urantia Book seems like pure metaphysics, a revelation of celestial hierarchies and divine purpose. But hidden in its pages is something even more surprising, a bold attempt to reconcile the universe of science with the universe of spirit. It doesn't reject science, it expands it. It claims that material reality, mind and spirit are not separate substances, but interconnected dimensions of one living cosmos. To understand the soul, the book insists, you must first understand energy. And to understand energy, you must realize it is alive. Written decades before the quantum revolution took hold, the Urantia Book described a universe sustained by invisible forces, ultimatons, it called them, the fundamental units of physical energy, smaller and more dynamic than electrons. It claimed that these forces respond not only to physical gravity, but also to spiritual gravity, the divine pull of the universal Father. In other words, even at the smallest scale of matter, there exists an echo of consciousness. Decades later, as quantum physicists began discovering the strange behavior of particles that act as if they know they are being observed, this idea seemed less like fantasy and more like foresight. But the book's approach to science isn't to impress with predictions, it's to provoke wonder. It suggests that physical reality is only the outer garment of creation, the body of a vast, intelligent mind. Every atom, every cell, every brain is a temporary pattern in the flow of cosmic intelligence. We are not observers of the universe, we are participants in its unfolding. This is not mysticism disguised as science. It's an invitation to think beyond reductionism, to see matter as meaning in motion. The bridge between these realms, says the book, is mind. Mind is the mediator between matter and spirit, the living interface where divine influence meets human experience. It's through the mind that we interpret both science and faith, logic and intuition. The text describes 7 levels of mind, from the instinctual awareness of primitive creatures to the reflective consciousness of humanity, and beyond that, to the Urantia mind, a transitional state between material and spiritual existence. Our brains, in this model, are not the source of thought but the instruments through which cosmic mind expresses itself. Modern neuroscience is in its own way catching up. The more we study consciousness, the less it behaves like a mere byproduct of brain chemistry. The Urantia Book suggests that consciousness is not generated by neurons, but channeled through them, like light through glass, and when the glass shatters at death, the light continues elsewhere. This view transforms not just how we see life, but how we see death, not as an end, but as a phase shift, from material frequency to spiritual resonance. The book also explores evolution, insisting it is both real and divinely guided. It describes the emergence of life on Earth as a process initiated by celestial scientists called life carriers, who implanted the original living plasma in ancient seas, allowing natural forces to shape it over millions of years. Evolution, therefore, isn't random chaos. It's the mechanism through which the divine experiments and learns. That statement once seemed heretical to both science and religion, but it now mirrors what many modern thinkers call intelligent evolution, a universe that learns through experience. And what of the human soul? Here, the Urantia book becomes profoundly psychological. It says the soul is born at the moment when the moral mind first chooses truth over self-interest. Every such choice creates substance in another dimension, not metaphorically but literally. Your thoughts and actions build a spiritual identity that survives the body. The soul grows every time you align your will with divine will, every time you turn experience into wisdom. It is the inner child of two parents, the human mind and the indwelling divine fragment. When these two cooperate, the soul becomes immortal. Psychology and spirituality meet beautifully in this view. Modern therapy teaches that healing begins when you integrate all parts of yourself, conscious and unconscious. The Urantia book teaches the same on a cosmic scale. Healing occurs when the human mind integrates with the divine mind. Conflict, anxiety, and suffering are symptoms of separation. Peace arises not from control, but from alignment. The universe, it says, is not fighting against us, and it's waiting for us to harmonize with it. This integration extends to ethics. Science without spirit becomes cold and destructive. Spirituality without reason becomes delusion. The book challenges both extremes. It insists that true wisdom lies in synthesis, in using knowledge to serve love, and using love to enlighten knowledge. The great civilizations of the future, it predicts, will emerge not through domination, but through understanding. When humanity learns to see all truth, from physics to prayer, as expressions of the same universal intelligence. And perhaps that's the quiet miracle of the Urantia book. It gives permission to wonder again. It whispers that every experiment, every formula, every act of curiosity is a sacred act, because seeking truth in any form is communion with the divine. It bridges the laboratory and the temple, the scientist and the mystic, the neuron and the soul. In the end, its message is simple yet transformative. Science reveals how God creates, and religion reveals why. Between them lies the human mind, the conscious bridge across which eternity learns to understand itself.
Every great story in the Urantia book leads here to a single breathtaking revelation that humanity is not an accident, not an isolated episode in a cold and meaningless cosmos, but an intentional part of an unfolding divine adventure. The universe, the book says, is not finished. It is still being written, and we, the inhabitants of Urantia, are co-authors of its next chapter. Our destiny is not destruction, but ascension. Our struggles are not punishment, but preparation. According to the Urantia book death is not the end of life, but the beginning of greater awareness. The moment consciousness leaves the physical body, it awakens on the mansion worlds the first stage of what the book calls the Urantia life, a series of spiritual training spheres surrounding our local system's headquarters. Their newly resurrected souls continue their education, relearning existence in finer, subtler bodies made of Urantia material, the bridge between matter and spirit. Imagine waking into light, greeted by teachers who already know your past and your potential, where every experience you've had on Earth becomes part of your curriculum. Each world, the book explains, is a classroom, On one, you learn cosmic ethics, understanding universal law beyond human culture. On another, you learn energy mastery, how thought and will shape reality. On others still, you learn to create in harmony with the divine pattern. The journey is long, millions of years perhaps, but every stage is guided. You are never alone, and you never regress. Each failure becomes raw material for growth. Every sorrow you've endured becomes wisdom the universe can use. Ultimately, this progression leads to the central universe of Havona, the eternal creation surrounding Paradise, the home of the Universal Father. There, the soul reaches what the Urantia Book calls finalita status, the full fusion of human personality with divine fragment. The mortal becomes immortal, not through worship, but through co-creation. The soul that began as dust now radiates with the consciousness of eternity. In Havona, all dualities dissolve, science and religion, matter and spirit, self and God, because they were never separate to begin with. It's a staggering vision, one that reframes existence itself. Every choice you make, every act of courage, compassion, curiosity echoes far beyond your lifetime. You are not evolving only for yourself. You are participating in the evolution of the Supreme Being, the growing soul of the universe. When you forgive, when you love despite fear, when you create beauty from pain, those vibrations enrich the entire cosmic organism. The Supreme expands through human experience. Every life, no matter how small or broken, contributes to the perfection of the whole. Think about that for a moment. The same hands that struggle to survive, the same mind that doubts, the same heart that hurts, all of it is sacred material in the making of God's evolving presence. That is the real message of the Urantia Book *. Divinity is not distant. It's participatory. Creation is still happening, and you are part of the process. The text foresees a time when humanity will awaken collectively to this truth. Wars will end not through conquest, but through understanding. Religion will no longer divide, but unite under a single realization that all paths, when sincere, lead to the same source. Science will no longer deny spirit, it will uncover it in every equation. And philosophy will become not speculation, but lived wisdom, the art of harmonizing the inner and outer universes. This is not utopia, it's evolution, a slow, deliberate ascent toward light. Even more astonishing is the claim that once humans reach the final stage of perfection, their mission doesn't end. The perfected souls, the finaliters, return to the unfinished worlds, bringing light where darkness still dwells. The universe, says the book, recycles enlightenment. The awakened ones become the teachers of the next generation of souls, guiding new worlds toward understanding. The process never stops. Creation feeds on creation. Learning becomes eternal service. For the modern reader, this is more than cosmology. It's psychology on a universal scale. It tells us that purpose is not something you find, it's something you grow into. That despair is never final because existence itself bends toward progress. It invites us to live differently, to see every act of kindness, every pursuit of truth, as a step in our own ascension. Of course, skeptics will say it's just myth, an elaborate allegory for human hope. Maybe so, but perhaps myth has always been the language of higher truth, a way for the infinite to speak in symbols we can understand. Whether the Urantia Book is revelation or vision, its purpose is the same, to awaken that ancient memory within you that whispers, you are more than you think. Because if the universe truly is alive, if every mind contributes to the unfolding of divinity, then the question is no longer what is the meaning of life, but how will I participate in it? The Urantia Book ends not with certainty, but with invitation to think, to explore, to become. And maybe, just maybe, that is the real secret of Urantia, that the voice you thought came from the heavens has been speaking through you all along.